Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, India's first Future Tech Meets Sustainability podcast. I'm your host, Eddie Avil, and today I have with me Dr. Abhijit Sarkar, who is a Senior Research Associate within the Division of Data and Analytics at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. He leads the computer vision and machine learning team at VTTI, and his research focus is in the intersection of artificial intelligence and transportation research, with an emphasis to computer vision. Today, the topic of discussion is going to be future of mobility. So, Dr. Abhijit, really appreciate you taking time and being part of Humble Podcast. Can you start with providing an overview of the current state of autonomous vehicle technology, the different levels of autonomy in self-driving cars, and the potential impact you think it could have on the transportation industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for talking to me and giving me the opportunity to talk about this. Is something which I'm really excited about. The future of mobility is very exciting at this point. In terms of driving, I want to give a little bit of background understanding. That means how autonomy is slowly taking over driving from human, right? So if you think about it, that it's generally human who drives a vehicle, right? And means they have certain tasks, right? If we try to understand the subtask of a driving, it's like they have to perceive a scene, they have to know that who are in that scene, and then basically navigate through it. And very simplistic way, if you look at driving, it is basically longitudinal and lateral control, right? So longitudinal means that we control the acceleration and braking of a vehicle to move forward. And then lateral control means that if we need to move sideways, and in many cases, like if we need to do lane change, so this kind of tasks are there. However, because this is like we are working and means in a dynamic scenario where the infrastructure, we have an infrastructure laid out, and on top of that, we have like a dynamic scene there. Their safety is a paramount priority for all these systems, right? And SAE, who has governed like how the autonomy, when this driving task will be transferred to a machine, they have total of 6 categories there. The first 3 categories, which are still like human is the primary driver, or the human is primarily responsible to do all these driving tasks. And in the last 3 categories, the machine is slowly taking over this systems, right? So the first 3 part is mostly assistive system. So it's kind of looking at how a machine can help me to travel from point A to point B in a safe and efficient manner. Okay. Level 0, which is almost no autonomy, but you can have certain warning systems, which can be like forward collision warning. If you have a vehicle in the blind spot and you are trying to change the lane, it will give you a warning from there. So that could be like level 0 kind of autonomy. Level 1 and 2 are like little bit of taking over the lateral and longitudinal controls, and it can be like adaptive cruise control. It can be lane centering, right? So that kind of systems are there. From level 3 to 5, these 3 particularly, slowly the system is taking over from human, and it is basically doing all these tasks that a human does. Okay. Level 3 is still very restricted, maybe in a situation, maybe traffic jam, or maybe say a place where we know that this is a slow moving crowd, and it can be somewhere, maybe say dock, right? A shipping dock where we need to load and unload, but means the traffic is very slow. In those situations, maybe we can have a level 3 autonomy. However, the driver needs to be very much aware that when they need to take over. So the driver is still very much vigilant to the scenario. I mean, there should be an interactive system, an AHMI system, which will govern them. Level 4 and 5, level 4 specifically is still like, maybe you can think about geofence, and within that geofence, the system still works properly. But at that scenario, basically the machine is driving. Okay, anything happens with outside the geofence, that system may not work. Okay, or maybe other conditions that it is designed for, it can work. Robotaxi is maybe one part of the example. And level 5 is basically the gold standard. It is like everything is done by machine. Human interaction is almost negligible, unless like you are talking about your emotions and maybe something else, or maybe you're interacting where you want to go. But otherwise, the control wise, everything is done by machine. So this is kind of like the basics of the level of autonomy is there.
Right. Various companies have been working on autonomous vehicles. And there are people such as Elon Musk who actually claimed in, I think, somewhere around 2017 that we should be having level 5 autonomous vehicles by 2020. And here we are at 2024. It's so, I'm sure it's not such an easy engineering task to build a level 5 autonomous vehicle. We still are at level 3 autonomous vehicles, which is commercially available. Can you maybe explain the core tech stack that's needed to build an autonomous vehicles? What all are needed, because, when a human is driving a car, there's so many things which is happening, it's not just your visual, it's also about hearing, there's like an ambulance passing and stuff like that. So maybe it'll be great if you can kind of explain the core tech stack that's needed to build an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, you're absolutely right. That means this is a very challenging task altogether, right? And now maybe you have seen the shift in the whole this industry, that now we have moved from like level 5 to maybe now we are again talking about using some of those technologies to some of the assistive systems, right? While some companies are still building this kind of work, but this is actually a very difficult engineering task. And first, let me talk a little bit about that engineering part, but means there are other part of it as well, which are basically infrastructure, which are like, and then we have regulations, we have like our understanding and trust about those systems. So these are all like various ways that should come together in order to go to level 5 autonomy. But if we just talk about the engineering task, then maybe again I want to go back to the idea that okay, this is something a human is driving, right? So we are trying to take that task, how a human drives, and take that task to a machine and probably do it better, right? That's the idea, that we want to do it better. Every year is like in US, 35,000 people die just because of like road fatality. In India, I think that it is in the one of the topmost numbers if you look at in terms of the traffic fatality. So the engineering task again, like if I want to go from point A to point B, right? Say that I want to go from home to a grocery store. In that case, first I need to understand that how to control a vehicle. Okay, that's the basic thing, to interact with the machine. That's number one. Number two is that to understand that where I am. Okay, which means that localization. So when I get onto my car, it's at my home, right? Now I know that there is a path to my grocery store, and maybe an efficient path to my grocery store, right? So that has like a part of localization, and then maybe a little bit of path planning, right? The initial path planning. Now the next part, which is basically even coming to more granular part, is that trying to understand the static and dynamic scenes. Okay, so what is static and dynamic scenes? Static scene is like everything like a road, building, infrastructure, traffic signs, traffic lights, everything can be part of my static systems, right? Which generally doesn't change in a regular basis, right? It can change if there is a work zone, it can change, but however, it generally doesn't change. But there is the major component is the dynamic scene, which are like all the other actors. There are other cars. You mentioned about an ambulance. There is a pedestrian going. a bicyclist, different other kind of, and when I visit India, one thing that I really struggle to understand to solve the problem. The problem there is more critical because we have like this different speed vehicle. They share the same road areas, right? All the tuk-tuk, toto, and everything that we see, they're all part of the system. So how that dynamic scene I can understand properly, and then I can safely navigate, but also efficiently navigate, right? So if you think about it, the easiest thing is that, okay, you move at 1 miles per hour, right? That is probably safest way to do it. But is that the most efficient way? No, it's not, right? So that's where the perception and then the planning part comes into picture. And the planning is like the short-term and long-term planning, okay? And I can talk you mostly from the perception side because means that has been most of my work. So I can talk a little bit more about that. So perception is like we use different sensors, right, to understand the perception, the 3D scene geometry, which is in front of us. Now, the problem is that we take our human vision for granted, right? That means it is such a complicated and like an excellent system that you put us in any scenario, we will understand the 3D geometry of that scene, right? And if I am asked to work in different part of this world, maybe I will do a reasonable job to do that because means that particular perception is within me. But moving that perception to a machine is not a trivial task, and that's where most of the challenges comes in, right? And means over the last, I would say that last 20 years specifically, that we are trying to solve that problem more efficiently, right? So if you look at the different era of artificial intelligence, then maybe the last 20 years marks like the most of the progresses, but the from 2012 when you have deep neural network coming in. Okay, so perception systems, we have cameras and different kind of cameras. We have lidars, radar. So these are basically the three major systems that people use, right, for autonomy. Depending on different companies, they use a combination of this. So, for example, Tesla doesn't use lidar as of now, right? Many other companies, they use all these systems, right? So and then each one comes with their own limitations, and that's the reason that means they start to work on this. For example, camera is a 2D image, right? So we are getting a 2D image of the 3D world. Okay, again, this is fascinating that how we do this task, like how, like even with like one eye, our system is trained in such a way that we can perceive depth very, very well. Okay, even with that. However, transferring that into a machine is difficult. And this was probably in 2014 that we were doing a class, and the teacher told us that we often think that registration, which is like basically having two eyes, the information that we are getting from two eyes, and then combining them together, is a solved problem. But means if you ask some of the pioneers in this field, they will ask that some of the top problems are still this registration. Okay, so still we haven't gone into the level of human perception in terms of the depth understanding, in terms of the 3D scene understanding. Okay, so that's just camera. Then comes to lidar. Okay, so lidar is another system, and which is great because means lidar can get you the 3D information, the 3D scene information in terms of the point cloud there. So it's a great system to have. However, it loses a lot of other information, color, texture. Those informations are lost. They are costly at this point, very costly. They are very, like in terms of storage, they are very much demanding in terms of storage, like gigabytes of data that you need to process, right? So that's where, even if like it gives you an information about the 3D scene, that provides a lot of challenges for us. And now think about that, combining them together and building them in a uh, cohesive manner, such that means the information from one sensor and another sensor, they are used properly. Okay, and radar is another way to do it. So overall, like for perception, this is a uh, these are some of the parts and parcel of the perception systems that currently being built, and then it has challenges, and we can probably talk about a lot about the challenges currently, limitations, and what's happening.
Abhijit, really appreciate you kind of, giving us a lowdown on the perception systems of these cars are loaded with sensors. You mentioned about cameras and lidars and radars. So your research is largely in the space of the computer vision. Can you talk about like more about these perception stack, if there has been any breakthroughs in VTTI in the field of computer vision in the autonomous cars space? Anything that you would want to share with us?
I should probably talk a little bit about 2009 time frame, where the object detection. So this is basically object detection, right? That object detection and scene perception, those things come up, and there was something called deformable part-based model. Okay, and most people try to work with that kind of systems, which is basically our hand and everything, which are with which moves freely, right? So this is not a rigid body. So trying to go from maybe something only a car or only an aeroplane, going to like understanding them, and means trying to understand from different shape and size and color, and doing an efficient job for that we started working slowly, that whole community started working there. Now 2012 brought in something very specific, which is the deep neural network, right? And now everyone talks about deep neural network. What it showed is that suddenly this kind of object detection, and maybe image classification task, we can do very efficiently. And means at that time there was like everyone was doing 1%, 2%, 3%, and they had a huge jump suddenly. Okay, and that showed that we can use large scale data, we can use good computing power, and we can develop good algorithm to perceive the scene well. It changed everything. Okay, however, I mean, slowly different groups, they started to understand that, okay, what are the limitations, how we can engineer this system better, so that they are more efficient uh, for our uh, uh, downstream task. And means if you think about like that autonomy that we are talking about, like these are like driving is the downstream task from which uses this kind of systems, right? So deep neural network comes in, and part of that convolutional neural network, right, which is a big part of like image processing, came in. And then the next revolution came in terms of like transformer, something called transformer, uh, which brought in new idea about how you process temporal information, right? And then it even if it was mostly developed for natural language processing, but the community slowly adapted it for computer vision as well. So all these systems slowly started to grow, and this kind of development started to get into uh, the field of automated vehicle, where we started to think that, okay, yeah, we can now identify the scene which is surrounding us. We can identify that where to go if we have a free path in front of me, where I can accelerate a little bit, or means if there is a pedestrian crossing in front of me and I need to press the brake. These are some of the aspects that slowly started to come in. So this has been like overall perception journey, if you say. Now different modalities, yes, means camera, different kind of cameras we have. Maybe many times we need to use uh, different kind of cameras, including RGB, NIR cameras, maybe heat. Uh, so some of the cameras are like they give heat map of the whole scene, right? So those kind of cameras came in. Stereo cameras are also there, right? So this kind of cameras slowly came in, and different kind of lidars are there, right? So even if like we think that lidar is one big chunk, but means there are different kind of lidars which people started to work on there, right? So yeah, so that's basically the overall perception work that has been here. In terms of VTTI's work, again, means my work has been mostly for the automated systems. Again, we don't develop systems there, but sometimes we develop a small part of it, like that in 2018-19 time frame, we realized that there is no system which can identify work zone scenes, right? The work zone or construction zone scenes. So we did some work there to just create a data set and then basically trying to understand how it's possible. I worked on a federal highway EAR project where we tried to understand this each part of this computer vision tasks and how well they perform, and if we can develop some small systems which can be used for our naturalistic data. So that has been some of my work related to uh, uh, perception stack here.
Building an autonomous vehicle, it's not just the perception stack. It's the localization, it's the planning, the motion, the control, and various other tech stack. What do you think are the challenges which still needs to be overcome, to build a level 4 autonomous vehicle, and what are the works that you and your team are doing at VTTI to kind of overcome those challenges?
I think that there are maybe a lot of challenges at this point. Um, let's talk about level 5. It's probably easier to look at the landscape there, and then you can downgrade them to level 4, level 3 that way. Uh, we actually want that system to work in every scenario. Okay. And when I say every scenario, it can be like different city structure, day versus night, different weather conditions, rain, fog, snow. Everywhere we want it to travel safely. Okay. Now, for the perception system specifically, uh, what is happening is that because these systems most of the systems are done through like supervised learning, which are like you have a set of data, you have some annotations, and you try to train your perception system so that they can understand the scene properly. The problem is that you cannot have a data set which covers everything. Okay, so you need, and that's where one term that goes into this computer vision or AI community is that how well we can generalize this learning, right? Or even like if we give 2 or 3 examples for a certain object, then how well we can the system can learn that, right? So if say that someone who has seen maybe uh, uh, sedan, they have seen a bus, but if I just show them a minivan, they can probably understand that okay, this is similar to a car and um, a bus, right? So somewhere the functionality wise it can understand that kind of cases. Same thing is that if today I'm wearing a shirt of this color and tomorrow I wear a shirt of different color, right? So I should have that understanding that okay, this is still a person, right? Another example, and it's, currently we are mainly working on like vulnerable road users, which are like so bicyclists, pedestrians, people on wheelchair, right? So these group of people we are trying to understand. So that's where the same question comes, that can and can the perception stack of these kind of systems identify pedestrians in all situations, pedestrians in all lighting conditions, like under different roadway lighting and maybe daytime. Uh, it can identify them. Or if I know that, okay, this is the bicycle, this is the pedestrian, and now suddenly I see a person on a wheelchair, right? Or maybe e-scooter, right? E-scooter is something new, which is like on in US, like lots of people use that. If I see that system, then whether I can identify its characteristics, and I can say, oh yeah, it's probably something similar to this, or something similar to that. Okay, so that perception, we really don't know that whether all these perception systems are actually capable of getting all this diverse information together. Okay, so that is one of the biggest challenge for us at this point. Okay, and we are working with different capacities at VTTI to understand these systems so systematically. Okay, so we have a smart road here, and where basically we do a lot of testing for this kind of systems, and that's where majority of our safety related task and means understanding the perception system, understanding its efficacy in terms of deploying it in the real world scenario comes in.
Like you mentioned about these public road testing, but there are a lot of companies who are also exploring simulations. NVIDIA has got a stack, for doing simulation training. So what are your views on public versus simulation training?
I think that it makes totally sense for like most of the manufacturer to just use simulations, because real world testing is very expensive, right? And also there is another system is like, in order to prove that these systems are safe enough, generally like in US, almost like million miles are driven per crash, right? So which seems like a lot of miles, but means if you take all of them together and the number of fatality, that's actually the number of fatality is quite high. Okay, so in those cases, like the one thing that we need to prove, or means the industry needs to prove, is that any system that they build, they are better than human, and they are better than human, and not like at par. They are like 100 times better than human, right? So maybe for every 100 million miles that they drive, they will probably have one crash. Okay, but that is very difficult, because think about that, someone has to drive 100 million miles, it will take years and years, and means the development will be stalled. So that's where the simulation platform makes sense. That means there are simulation platform where they develop these systems, they test these systems, they use a large computational resources to perform all the simulations. And what is good about simulations, that ideally you can create different scenarios, right? So from the same scenario, you can add a lot of if then else there, right? So maybe you can add a vehicle, you can say that, okay, what if I am driving at this speed versus that speed? What if the vehicle in front of me, it brakes at a rate of this versus at a rate of this, right? So how will be my response? Will I still be crashing or not crashing? And then slowly learning their path planning, their control. That's where simulation really comes into place. However, the question that remains is that how well we can replicate all real world scenario into a simulation platform. That's where the question remains, and we still don't know properly that how well that gap has been identified, means how well that gap can be identified in near future.
You mentioned, there's a lot of engineering challenges which still needs to be overcome to build a level 4 autonomous vehicle. Then possibly we'll go to a level 5 autonomous vehicle. besides the engineering challenges, there are a lot of social challenges also. I mean, because of these large language models, transformers, what they're able to do at this point in time. There's a global conversation on suddenly that tech is overtaking everything, and obviously it's going to lead to a world which is automation, where there's going to be job loss and things like that. That stands true for autonomous vehicles also, because that so far has been a human domain, where humans drive a car. That the thought itself that in another few years, maybe a decade or so later, that there'll be no humans will be driving a car. There won't be possibly a steering wheel. There'll be like, I mean, you could just walk in. There's a lot of pros. Pros are like, I mean, like you mentioned in India, there's like, I think just the data is that in 2022 there was around 4.5 lakh fatalities. And another a large number of injuries, which is related to cars. So there's lots of pros. What are the social challenges according to you, which still you think the public perception which still needs to be overcome in, acceptance of these autonomous vehicles?
Okay. So maybe going back to, so you have like lots of questions here. So one question that I would, one thing, this is my personal belief, is that I don't think that machines will be driving vehicles. Only machines will be driving vehicles in a decade time frame. It's too like, yeah, it's, I don't think this is happening at this point. And even if it's happening, it's probably in a very limited areas. So still human will be driving. Okay. But maybe the mode of transportation will change. Okay, the way that we travel from point A to point A, that will change, right? We will have more assistive system. If people are still driving vehicles, then probably we will have more assistive systems there, right? So so that's like a general thought for from my side. Now you talked about like, okay, machine taking over world. Yeah, this is like a fear which maybe many of the people are having. And if you think about, like, I think that recently someone said that you don't need to learn coding because LLMs are doing all the codings, right? So still, I don't think that that person meant exactly that. I mean, still coding, the idea of like putting an human idea to a machine will still be there. Maybe the scale will change, right? So means at one point of time people used to do assembly language. Now we very few people do assembly language coding, right? From like previously, when I was in school, we used to learn C and C++ mostly, right? So now maybe most of the people learn like Python, right? So it's like different kind of level of abstraction that goes into the system, right? So machine taking over the world, that's like, yeah, there are debate and there will be debate whether that, but I believe that every time something comes in, new opportunities comes along with that, right? So the best thing for us to like learning, unlearning, and relearning. Okay, so learn new things. If new technology comes, probably unlearn that previous thing and relearn and connect that dots, right? So that will be like a growth of the human civilization will be in this way. Okay. Now coming back to your last question, which are based on like social side of um, autonomy and like trust, this is still a very open field, and means lots of people are working on understanding that how to build this trust. However, when I was in one of the meeting in DC, and means they started talking about trust, and we also start thinking that, okay, when I go into I start driving on a road, then I believe that all the other vehicles, they will follow a certain protocol, right? If I cannot believe that, then I cannot drive a vehicle, right? If I take like all possible conditions that they can do, and that will be very difficult for me. Okay, so for example, like today when I was driving here, I was merging on the highway, and suddenly I saw that there is a vehicle coming, which is supposed to stop, but it didn't means or slow down or change lane to give me to merge, and I had to give way to them, only to realize afterwards that it had another vehicle in the left lane which was going at the same way, right? So this like trust, belief, understanding that what it can do, that anticipation, we still don't know about the automated vehicle. And that's the problem, that there is, it's a black box to us, right? And we really don't know that what is inside that black box, where it can fail, and how that failure can be catastrophic to us. That we don't understand. For human, we know a little bit because I'm a human being. I have a good understanding about another human being, their limits, what they can do. Like unless they have very like bad motive, they will drive in a reasonable way, right? That trust is still not there, and that's why more education is needed, more understanding of these systems are needed, and industry, academia, government, everyone should come together to, if we really want to go to level 4, level 5, and means generalize across all different geographic areas, then all these partners need to come together and start building this understanding, that low level to high level understanding, that why things happen, how things happen. And everyone might have a different questions, and means we were investigating previously that maybe a rider needs a different kind of information than a regulator who is creating a rule, right? So different places of that. But again, this is this is the this is the basic challenge. We don't know how it works, or even if we know, that knowledge is not dissipated properly. Whatever we know, that is not dissipated properly. So everything is on hunch, everything is guesses, lots of informations are not revealed. um, and again, when safety is at stake, we need to collaborate properly.
Right, right. Yeah. So there are lots of issues that still needs to be overcome. And I think tech has been a partner. Like you said, we need to learn, unlearn quickly to move ahead with the time, and leverage this tool as, this tech stack and move ahead. Your thought on that maybe 2020, this by this decade, we might not have autonomous vehicle. Maybe I might just push that a little bit because I was having a conversation, I think maybe around 3 years back with Sanjeev. Sanjeev leads Swayat Robots. He's building an autonomous vehicle. In March, he did a demo showcasing running on a narrow road, bidirectional, extremely narrow road, bidirectional traffic. And his goal is to build autonomous level 4 by the end of the year. That's what he claims. Now, you rightfully pointed out, there's so many dynamics. We're still in the IC vehicle phase, from there to move to EVs, that, clean energy space, that itself is going to be such a huge challenge. And then from there to transitioning to AVs, autonomous vehicle, that itself is going to take a long time. But like I said, people like Sanjeev and others who feel and believe truly that by that they should be able to solve the level 4 autonomy problem by the end of the year, and they feel that by the end of the decade they will. I mean, we should have autonomous cars running. Maybe share your thoughts on that, and also maybe talk about your works on your driver distraction and attention monitoring that you've been working on.
Okay, yeah, sure. So maybe let's first talk about the first part of it. So Yes, means I really appreciate that. Means so many engineers are currently working, and means this is driving a lot of innovation in this field, right? So a lot of engineering innovation, scientific innovations that's happening in this field, because means so many focused and means great engineers and scientists, they are working in this field. Uh, Now, in and again, this is something maybe in 2016. Maybe Amnon Shashua from Mobileye. I forgot the year, maybe either 2016 or sometimes later. He was saying that, okay, means engineering problem is one part of the story. Like there are many other part of the story that we need to understand. And oftentimes, like many of these engineers, if we give them a task, they can probably do it very efficiently, very well. So maybe creating that kind of robots are probably great. And if you look at like something like uh, I think that Boston Dynamics, right? So means the kind of robots that they are showing is like fascinating, right? So they're great systems. So engineering wise, maybe that's to some extent. Again, there are various challenges. We just discussed about some of those challenges there. Now, the other part of the story is that if we want to bring that system into the real world, and particularly transportation, which is like such a big part of our day-to-day life, right? And it affects us so much. That's where a few other things needs to come together. One is infrastructure. So it is like one way is that, okay, the engineering part is growing, but also the infrastructure needs to be built in order to support that engineering excellence. Okay, so if the lane line marking is not good enough, then probably they will also falter in terms of identifying the lane line. If the reflectivity of the road signs are not good enough, then maybe it will be very difficult to actually find out what that road sign is actually saying to me, right? So all the systems are needs to these two needs to grow together. The third part is regulation. So what we don't know at this point is that what will happen if something goes wrong. Number one. Number two is that how to certify these vehicles, right? For human drivers, we have a driving test, right? But do we have something like that? We don't know, right? There are various standards coming up. So there are ISO standards are coming up. NIST is working on that, right? IEEE is working on that. SAE is working on that, right? So all these people, all these groups are starting to build this kind of ideas together, that what is safety? How much safe is safe enough, right? These kind of questions are still unanswered. So that's where the regulation comes into picture. Okay, so that's the third part. The fourth part, and we already discussed about that, that's the public acceptance and the public trust. Okay, and at this point the distrust is probably reasonable because of the lack of information. Okay, but that's the other part of this. So it all depends that how all these different systems come together. Means if like all the systems grow together, and maybe in next 2 years everything is solved, great, we'll have autonomy in next 2 years. But if not, then probably it will not be. And if you look at the way that scientific community works, it's like there is certain development, then a group of scientists work again, work with social scientists as well, and means actual human feedback we get, and then we raise more questions. Okay, now again the whole community work on those questions, right? So I believe, as someone who likes science, who like the whole idea of the scientific community and their contribution, then we should start uh, understanding the systems more, asking more questions, and grow accordingly. So the vision that all these groups have, including the one you mentioned, are great. Means they are great vision, but probably a lot of things need to be fall together in the same place in order to make them realize.
My last question to you, is there any update research work of VTTI or yours personal that you would like to share? And maybe like, share your view or vision on the autonomous vehicle, that we all are, seen in these movies or, we've dreamt about. What do you think the world is going to look like when we truly have autonomous vehicles?
In next few years, I will probably focus on two aspects. Number one aspect is understanding these perception systems. I and another part is that I am specifically interested in sensor fusion, how sensor fusion and navigation, this work come together. We recently got an award from NASA where we'll be using some of these systems, and maybe from ground vehicle to like aircraft systems, how these systems and knowledge can be transferred. Um, I also work on the unmanned aerial vehicle, as well drones, and means understanding their efficacy in terms of like safety um, of these systems, safety of overall roadway networks as well, and how we can integrate UAVs into the overall structure of the society. The other one that I will be working is on driver health. So particularly like in US, like trucking is a billion-dollar industry, and means a lot of people are working in this industry uh, who specifically suffer from different uh, medical conditions, and many of them are due to their irregular shifts, their work type of work. So I want to understand that part of work a little bit more. So I'm using wearable technology at this point to uh, understand that how and this is more of a prognosis kind of idea, that not diagnosis, that once they are 40 or 50 years old, they know that they have sleep apnea, they have a heart problem, but we want to understand that even in the 30s, that if this is something happening. So I will be working on that, and I also work a little bit on like remote health monitoring, which are basically using cameras to understand that what is their psychophysiological condition of a driver. So I will be working on that. So these are some of the areas that I envision myself to work in the next 3 years. But again, things are changing. Large language model is here. We already have a paper now on large language model. We'll probably work more on that. So we really don't know. Lots of possibilities. In terms of the future, again, where it will be, we really don't know. Because it's like lots of things and lots of people, policies, how different countries come together in building those policies are there. What I can say is that what I want safe transportation. I want sustainable transportation, right? You mentioned about EV. So means the carbon emission wise, and um, yeah, we want a sustainable transportation. Uh, we want a world where like there is zero fatality due to traffic accidents, traffic crashes. We don't call it accident, we call it crashes, right? So for due to traffic crashes. The other part, which is very important, is like accessible transportation to everyone. So like depend irrespective of their economic condition, irrespective of their race, gender, their capabilities, like age, everyone should have equal opportunity to go for this kind of transportations, right? And we want an efficient transportation systems where like if you know that we will lose millions of hours in traffic jams. So that's like unproductive hours for people, right? So we can envision this world, and means at VTTI we always uh, go for like a better world. Saving a single life means a lot to us, and means we spend day in day out. I spend day in day out to go for that world, so that we can leave a world for our next generation.
Doctor, really appreciate you taking time and being part of our Humble podcast. I think we're sitting in such a fantastic point of time, and your work, it's all inspiring because, there is not one thing that you're working with, and it's not just the perception stack. You just mentioned, you're working on unmanned aerial vehicles also. I see a future that, once we go from transition from ICE to EVs, and then from AVs, then possibly we'll have these aerial vehicles also. And there are companies who are working on that. And then you also mentioned about your work in the space of wearables and these EEG tech stack and cognitive understanding. So the world is getting so awesome, and you rightfully pointed out, I think that maybe in the next few years, we should be able to, build a transportation system which is safe and sustainable. And you also added that word, accessible. I think that is core, because here in India, at least, though because of the economical empowerment, there is more and more people who have personal vehicles. But I think public transportation is such a key for a nation to grow. I think Singapore has got that model so beautifully. I think the transportation is so brilliant. And I hope that the world also kind of goes towards that, where the transportation becomes like zero crashes that you mentioned, safe, sustainable, and accessible. So in that regard, wish you the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you hear, please just press the subscribe button. And until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you, Doctor. Really
thank you very much.